So for a lot of us, the music to Lost was a huge part of what drew us into the show, what made us feel things as we were watching it. And one of the things that I really like is in the track Life and Death, the piano does this, and it's like, how do you define that? It's not like super happy, it's not super sad, it's like somewhere in the middle. It's not pessimistic, it's nostalgic, and it's like, I think a real life example of this would be maybe say you're stressed out in the moment, but you're sort of daydreaming of a fond memory, right? So you have that essence of like the stressfulness or the sadness, but you're thinking like in your head kind of something that's nice, something that is happy. And I think that's exactly what these notes evoke to me. And then after a couple of bars, when it changes to this, I can imagine myself like nodding in the daydream towards like, okay, I'm starting to get into a deeper sleep. Because it's a little bit happier, it dun dun dun, so it goes a little bit higher, but you're still in a dream-like state, right? Especially those chords down on the bottom going. And I love how at the end of the track, it just ends in such a way that it makes you feel like, okay, I fell in the deep sleep. It's just, that was the last head nod and I'm in it. Or you died, you know? Like, there's so many ways you could take this ending. It's just such a melancholy, I don't know how to pronounce melancholy. And I think that's a huge part of why this track speaks to a lot of people, because it's not in the extremes of like happiness or sadness. It's in this middle of nostalgia and sadness, but happiness that you had those good times, you know, like, I don't know. It's just, it's in this area of emotion that I think pieces or music rarely addresses. And yet all of its experience. And so I think it really does speak to that. Okay, and then we get to this track called There's No Place Like Home, with a motif that's repeated in many of the other tracks, with the strings doing the da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it reminds me of an effect that I'm just gonna name. I'm gonna call it the repetition equals emotion effect, where you play something, but then you play that same thing again with added, I don't know, elements to it. And so it makes you think of it more, and then you do it again, and then you add more instruments, or you twist it a different way, and just you do it over and over and over, and it makes it feel like at first you're like, oh, this is nice, but then like, oh, now I'm thinking about it, and then oh my gosh, I feel like it's like all my emotions are coming out. I mean, a classical piece that comes to mind that does this is Bolero. It starts with this instrument. And then you add a few more instruments. And by the end you have... And by the end it's all crazy, all like... And I mean, that's a fun classical piece, sort of an example. But a cinematic equivalent, I'd say, would be when Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting looks at Matt Damon and he's like, it's not your fault.
This is not your fault.
And as a viewer, you're like, oh, you know, he's just starting a conversation. It's not your fault. But then...
Look at me, son. It's not your fault.
And then he says it again.
It's not your fault. I know. No, you don't. It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
And so even though initially you might just see them as just these words, with the repetition, you're starting to internalize what they actually mean. And it's not like Lost is the only soundtrack in pop culture to use this. I mean, Interstellar is an example that comes off the top of my mind. But the reason I think it's so powerful is because the piece itself brings a lot of specific types of images or feelings to mind. So for example, the first part where it just builds up and it goes da 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 da, brings to mind a feeling of there's a hopefulness. You're trying to arrive somewhere. Something you can imagine is maybe you're arriving from some stressful situation or adventure, and you start seeing like a friend coming your way, something like that. And then in the second part, you have some strings going down da 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 as the original ones continue to go up. And so that adds that texture, that color of, say in the example again of you're starting to see a friend coming your way, maybe it's like you see a couple of other friends, right? And you're just like, oh my gosh, I just want to see these people, I want to hug them, it's been a while, I've been through a lot. And as it climaxes, you really feel that sense of hopefulness, of love. So you have all of these things working in favor for this piece. The repetition emotion effect, the fact that it's actually great music and it adds different textures, and then changes things up so that you feel different aspects of what it's trying to tell you, which is, I think, a sense of love, even though you've experienced loss. And so those two tracks, with their themes and motifs that are repeated in many other of the tracks throughout the series, I think capture a huge part of what Lost is, which is capturing this sense of nostalgia, of loss, of love, of friendship, but never in a super final happy way or in a super depressing way, always in this dreamlike state, which is the island in a way, right? I mean, obviously there's so many interpretations to that, except for the final track, which adds some elements of finality to it, which is really cool, I think. But that's what I love about it. It gets me in this sense of feeling like I'm daydreaming, of thinking of fond memories, and of feeling grateful of the people that are around me. I mean, that's what this music does. That's powerful. That's awesome. And there are just so many, like, in researching this music compared to most of the other music that I've researched, I mean, yeah, there are some tracks that stand out for different movies that I've reviewed. And people are like, oh my gosh, this music is amazing. But by far, the soundtrack to Lost, up to this point, has been the one where I've seen most comments about how it's changed their lives. Like, this music changed my life, or this series changed my life. And it's, I mean, I will be reviewing Star Wars in the future, so maybe that will be the only other comparison that I can make. But it really speaks volumes to the emotion put into the music, I think, which was a big part of it. So thank you for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you want to help support the show, consider donating $1 per show, where you get access to an extra video, what didn't make it to the final cut for each soundtrack review. So you can do that over on Patreon. I'll put the link in the description below, and probably a button somewhere. Yeah, so thank you for watching Soundtrack Reviews, and I'll see you next time.